President Donald Trump says U.S. jobs have been lost due to badly negotiated trade deals that move manufacturing abroad. Globalization may be increasingly getting a bad rap, but the U.S. benefits from trade and investment with Africa. And Africa needs trade. It needs investment, manufacturing, and above all, with its massive youth bulge, Africa needs jobs. So are Trump and Africa on a collision course, or will they find mutual benefit? Hello, I'm Carol Pino. Welcome to Africa Today TV's special series, Africa and the Trump Administration. They are household names: Coca-Cola, Google, Walmart, Caterpillar, Citibank, Visa. The list goes on and on of Fortune 500 companies that are bullish on Africa. And why not? Africa offers the highest rate of return on direct investment. Africa is blessed with tremendous wealth in the form of natural resources that are of strategic importance to the U.S. The population is more than 1 billion, with a rising middle class that is estimated to be larger than the entire U.S. population. And Africa has a young population with high unemployment that offers opportunities for inexpensive labor. America needs Africa, and Africa needs America. So what happens to U.S. trade and investment with Africa under the current focus of America First? We have a fantastic lineup today. We have Flory Lizer, who is the CEO of Corporate Council on Africa and the former U.S. Trade Rep to Africa. We have Maria da Cruz, who is the CEO and President of the U.S. Angola Chamber of Commerce. And we have Carolyn Campbell, who is the founding partner and managing director of Emerging Capital Partners. Thank you so much for all of you being here. So, I would like to start with all of you going through a 30-second spiel of what you would have said to Trump, the businessman, before he became president, if you had gone to his office to pitch trade in Africa, trade and investment. So, Flory, if I can start with you.
So I think what I would have said to Trump as a businessman is that Africa is also an important part of any major company's bottom line. It's where many U.S. companies are growing and growing the fastest. So I would just say that he should continue to be bullish on global trade and investment, and particularly bullish on Africa, where there's an enormous opportunity.
What would you have told him?
I would say to businessman Trump that having the United States investing in Africa as it's growing and emerging will be a benefit to the people of the United States. Many may not know, cocoa from West Africa is exported to the United States raw and processed here in 35 states. That creates more than 10,000 jobs, U.S. jobs. And that can be done in many other commodities that the continent has to offer.
And would you have told him to build a hotel or an apartment building in Angola?
Oh, absolutely. Well, currently real estate is extremely high. The capital city, Luanda, is still, at least as of last year, the most expensive city in the world.
Really?
It is.
Wow. Maybe after seeing this show, he'll be there. So, Carolyn, tell us what you would have said to Trump, the businessman.
I would appeal to businessman Trump in two senses. The first would be that your predecessors across the aisle developed these initiatives with a business ethos in mind. But even more important than that, the rest of the world, all of these world actors are tapping into the African private sector in ways the U.S. cannot and never has. And if you want to make your mark as a businessman, be on the ground influencing skills and business ethos and transparency in ways that are strategic and tactical and are win-win for America on the security, of course, and on the business front.
You know, this issue of America being good and needing Africa, and Africa needing America, is really important. We really do need each other. Flory, I know that as U.S. Trade Rep, you went all over the world talking about these things, and I wonder if you can just give the side of why does America need Africa?
America needs Africa because the majority of consumers of U.S. goods and services are outside of our borders. And Africa, with 1 billion people, more than 50% of them under the age of 20, a huge youth bulge. Already, African consumers and businesses spend $4 trillion a year. And there are over 400 African businesses whose revenues are over $1 billion a year annually. Businesses who are there from all around the world, and not just China, but Europe, Brazil, India, Malaysia. All of those businesses are there for the same reasons that U.S. businesses are there, because it is the place where you can, in fact, be profitable and where the opportunities, again, are really matchless.
So Maria, can you take the Africa side of that? Why does Africa need America?
U.S. investors, when they invest on the continent, they not only invest in the country, but they also invest in its people. So I would say human capacity building, knowledge transfer, technology, just support and how to do things.
Your firm is really the granddaddy of all equity firms in doing this. I think it's really interesting what business has brought to Africa in terms of development. Your firm was involved in the most fundamental of all, of bringing cell phones to Africa.
Absolutely, Carol. And I think the investment you're referring to is the exciting CellTel investment. We saw the continent go from 2% of Africans having any sort of telephone connectivity to over 60%, and that was in a 5-year period. Similar things are happening in other sectors. We're in cellular towers, and we have grown in 4 years from about 500 towers to almost 25,000 towers. That's the kind of growth we're talking about. Wow. Similar growth in banking services. So in financial services, you're seeing the penetration rise similarly.
And there's a connection with Cell.
Absolutely. They're not going to be building bricks and mortar banks. They're going to be banking on their telephones. And it's fun. Private capital is at the forefront of that exciting development. You see something similar also in logistics. You see it in education.
And the people that invest with you are making quite a return at the same time.
They are. And we talk about businessman Trump, but he should be all ears for this, because when you have private capital behind an initiative, you really do see that it has to be on its best behavior. It has got to perform. If it's not a success story, the capital is going to go elsewhere.
President Trump has talked tough on trade deals, saying they should all be renegotiated. He abandoned the Trans-Pacific Partnership and threatened to pull out of NAFTA, calling it the worst trade deal ever. So far, the focus has been on China and Mexico, but Africa has its own trade deal with the U.S., the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which was recently renewed through 2025. AGOA provides duty-free access for approximately 5,000 products from about 40 eligible countries. But the president decides, at his or her sole discretion, whether to grant or withdraw beneficiary status. And like all trade agreements, there are mechanisms for repeal. AGOA is not just about trade. It's also about soft power, creating goodwill and strong bonds between nations. No question, AGOA is an important agreement, but how safe is it? So Flory, you have been involved with AGOA, I think since the beginning of AGOA. How safe is it? How much are people concerned about it?
Well, I think the thing that we really have to remember, Carol, is that since AGOA was put into place in 2000 by Congress, it has had all through the years strong bipartisan support. And there are many, many champions of AGOA. And their decision in 2015 to extend AGOA to 2025 was really a vote of confidence that with a secure and long-term environment, investors would come to Africa and invest in global value chains. And by the way, manufacturing in Africa, which is about $500 billion today, is estimated to increase to about $934 billion by 2025. So we know that AGOA is making a difference. But the one thing that I would also say is that AGOA has benefited the United States.
Yes.
Our exports to Africa have also increased tremendously, more than tripled over the years of AGOA. And U.S. businesses are selling their products and their goods and services to Africans, where the consumers are growing, where middle class and middle income Africans with more disposable income are buying products and ready to be active consumers in the global economy. So again, AGOA, I think, is there. And as you said, there is the chance that Congress could be convinced by anyone to repeal it. But my personal view is that they won't.
How much does AGOA encourage investment into Africa?
We have to have some trade leveling of the playing field, and I think AGOA is a cornerstone of that. I think the rest of the world would cheer if we got rid of it. Africa wouldn't, but they would have even more advantage with their own companies. So,
You know, one of the problems with AGOA is that there's been so much focus on the oil exports.
That's true.
And of course, Angola, you are a
It's-
major oil producer. What is Angola doing to diversify its AGOA offering?
Most recently, through AGOA, coffee was exported. Coffee, Café Kazango from Kwanza North, you can buy in your local Whole Foods. But what the government has been doing now is to build the necessary infrastructure to have products that can be processed and can be exported, qualified to be exported through AGOA.
What percentage of revenue for Angola is oil? Do you know?
About 80%, a little bit over 80%. I would say the reduced price of oil has been a blessed curse for Angola in particular, because it made it necessary for the government to look outside of oil and gas and really work on their diversification plan. As Angola has more than 70% arable land that is untouched, untapped, has not been mined or farmed.
And I think this is really the story of Africa right now, that as much as we're seeing happening, there's still so much more that could be done.
Exactly.
It's incredible, the potential.
As I say, I consider the continent what China was several years ago, and look at China today. And you see that China, Japan, as Flory mentioned, Brazil, the European Union, and others are really seeing the potential that the continent has to offer, and not having U.S. investment really being pushed on the continent is making the United States lose its ground, if you will, on the continent.
For Africa to really be major beneficiaries of the global trading system, they have to be able to add value to their products. It's just so critical if they are really going to be able to be the powerhouse that they are able to be, the potential they have to really contribute and to be the manufacturing floor of the world.
Trade and investment are the purview of the private sector. But government has a role to play in facilitating and creating an enabling environment. The U.S. has government agencies that help businesses expand internationally. There's Exim Bank, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or OPIC, U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and several others. Some offer funding, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what other countries offer. For example, in China, government and businesses work together, and deals come with government financing up front, making them highly competitive. Businesses from these countries are also not constrained by the same laws that U.S. businesses must operate under, particularly the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits any U.S. firm from paying bribes. Many credit the law with significantly reducing corruption throughout the world. But critics, including President Trump, say the law makes American firms less competitive. Does the U.S. need to do more to help business remain competitive? So, Carolyn, if I can have you talk about how much do businesses feel these constraints or the lack of kind of institutional major support that their competitors have?
When you take an investment from my firm, you know what our business proposition is and what's expected. But I think it is unfair to say the rest of the world isn't also at the table. I would say if you look at the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, for instance, their social and governance requirements are as high as ours. I would say the French and Europeans, after the Panama Papers came out, are equally strict and helping to shape the dialogue, which helps us. We are not an outlier.
I have friends that are investors that say that they're frequently talking to Africans about a deal, and eventually the Africans kind of get frustrated and say, you know, we like you, but we're sorry, we're going to go with somebody else.
Yes.
Are you finding that a lot?
Well, at least in regards to
Just
Angola.
are easier places to
Yeah,
get the money.
in regards to Angola, they always say, oh, doing business with Americans are so complicated. US EXIM is a key part to that. At the moment, internally, things are not set. And that has affected, at least in regards to Angola, 3 major projects that are still in the pipeline that have been approved and are ready to go. One of the companies has actually moved on and considered Canadian EXIM financing. Yes. So the jobs that would have been that would have gone to U.S. companies are now going to go to Canadians.
Now, Flory, I know that you had been the U.S. trade rep for Africa, but you are now the head of Corporate Counsel on Africa, which is really the advocacy, information, and helping arm of so many U.S. businesses going into Africa. I think probably the major Fortune 500 companies that are in Africa are all part of CCA. How much concern is there among them that things could change within these U.S. government agencies that facilitate trade and investment?
You know, I think we have to put a lot of this in context. You know, the U.S. has a wide number of agencies and a long history of initiatives that date far back. A number of these initiatives will continue to move forward, but I do think that we do have to be concerned about what looks like an effort to zero out some agencies. I think OPIC is one of them, as various principals in the administration. As they get into their jobs a little bit more, know their respective agencies and mandates a bit more, that actually what will happen is that the administration itself will become better informed about how these programs and initiatives work, what the value of them, these programs are, and that they themselves, from the inside, will become supporters of these programs. And that's not to say that there won't be any cuts, but I think from the inside, the new Trump administration will take a new look and will actually not proceed with some of the things that they've initially thought that they would do in Africa.
I would also add that when OPIC supports an investment or a fund, they actually go to the U.S. capital market, guaranteeing money as opposed to asking Congress to put money from one pot into another. They're not in the red. They are in the black. And I'm not sure that that subtle point has been made.
But I would also say, even with the money that is being invested in agencies that do humanitarian work in Africa, diverting some of those funds to agencies that actually do investing in sort of industry, manufacturing, because you are going to be providing jobs for Africans on the continent, and in essence, you know, improving the life, the quality of life for Africans. So
one of the things that I think businesses know is that when you're investing, when you are creating jobs, when you have mutually beneficial business arrangements and joint ventures that are good both for Africa and here, you're also impacting those issues of terrorism, you're impacting those issues of peace and security. There's no doubt that there's a connection between those.
Let's take some questions from our viewers. From Sege in Calgary. Trump is a businessman, so he understands competition. In Africa, the U.S. is in serious competition with China, and the U.S. is losing badly. Shouldn't the administration make a concerted effort to increase engagement with Africa? So Maria, you are the president of the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce. I'm wondering, first of all, is there a China-Angola Chamber of Commerce?
There is a China-Angola Chamber of Commerce.
That's your competition.
Yes, it is. It is. But I would say U.S. has lost ground, and many of that is due to the financial mechanisms that, frankly, we just don't have here. Angola has more than, as I said earlier, 70% of arable land that has not been tapped. And as President Trump says, America first, U.S. jobs, peace and stability, investing in on the continent, in particular in Angola, will provide additional jobs to the United States. For example, they can export, work on peanuts and export peanuts here raw, through manufacturing here to create peanut butter at these small and medium factories.
Or process it there.
Exactly, yeah, it's true. Or process it there, exactly. But I mean, just providing that the opportunities for U.S. engagement, stronger U.S. engagement on the continent, and particularly in Angola.
Well, I think we have to start a business for the peanut butter manufacturing. Now we just need some money and we'll just get it all together, right?
Right.
Our next question is from Michael in Washington. He asks, AGOA offers so much, so why are African countries only taking advantage of a small number of opportunities covered in the agreement? Flory, this has been a constant issue that we have looked at, why the African countries are not diversifying their offerings. I know you've talked about how Angola is. How are governments dealing with this?
So, first of all, I think we have to do a better job of educating people and sharing information about what has happened under AGOA. I think it's important to remember that when AGOA was launched in 2000, many of the countries that were eligible really didn't have a manufacturing base. And they had so many constraints on their side, not to mention inexperience with manufacturing for a large market like the United States. So it has taken some time, and we acknowledge that and actually make no apologies for that. That's a part of why we developed a number of trade capacity building programs and initiatives, including several presidential initiatives that really supported the building of African production capabilities and competitiveness, because you can produce a product, but you really still have to be able to compete in the U.S. market. And being able to ship a product to the U.S. duty-free doesn't help you to overcome if the transport costs are high or you can't get it to market on time. And so these are things that the Africans have been working on. Now, fast forward, there are products being sold now in Whole Foods, in Trader Joe's, in major U.S. grocery store chains, and we're seeing more and more of that all the time. With the 10-year extension of AGOA, I think that it is already attracting more investment into certain value chains in Africa, and we're seeing companies like PVH, we're seeing companies like Kate Spade, 3M and many others sourcing from Africa, along with those like Levi Strauss and others who've been on the continent in the apparel sector for a long time. It really is diversifying. And so I think that from now until 2025, my prediction is that we will see significantly more utilization of AGOA, and countries that are putting into place AGOA utilization strategies, which were called for in the 2015 bill, I think will be the ones who will have the greatest increase in their AGOA exports.
Igwan writes to us from Abuja, Nigeria. African college applicants are declining due to negative perceptions of the new administration. How does this affect much-needed talent required to develop the continent? And does the administration recognize the potential loss of revenue and American jobs? So Carolyn, I know skills development is a really important part to being able to invest in a company.
So aside, Carol, from the wonderful, rich cultural experiences that student exchange brings to the United States, there are two reasons why it's important to invest in education. But I'm going to tell you the story of Brazil. Brazil is a country that had very low penetration of education. And obviously, the public coffers were not as robust as perhaps, say, in the United States. And through private investment in education at all levels, including distance learning, K through 12, universities, their penetration grew from something like 20% of the population to 80% of the population. Wow. That's why you don't see boatloads of Brazilians coming up towards the American border. They made it. And so safety and security was achieved, but a return to investors was also achieved. One of the key companies that achieved that result in Brazil is listed on the New York Stock Exchange now, Laureate. So we have every ambition to be that company in Africa. We believe that the potential is limitless in Africa to do that very same trajectory, and we would achieve those cornerstone pillars that businessman Trump has of safety and security and a good economic return for the American capitalist.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much to my guests, Flora Lizer, Maria de Cruz, and Carolyn Campbell. To our viewers in Africa, America, and around the world, thank you so much for joining us. Visit us online and join the conversation. We want this series to create a respectful but robust debate on U.S.-Africa relations under this new administration. We'd love to hear from you with thoughts on this program and comments and questions on upcoming topics. Make sure your voice is heard. We hope you've enjoyed the program and that you'll continue to tune in for our entire series on Africa and the Trump administration.